Good morning, everybody, and welcome here to the Capitol Media Center. Thanks for everybody taking the time to be here. We're here today to talk about what will soon be introduced as House Bill 2500, something that I view as a generational issue that is certainly changing dynamics over time, and that's the adult use and legalization of cannabis. The bill that we introduced has really been primarily focused on 5 pillars, those pillars being public safety and consumer protection, social equity and criminal justice reform, leveraging Pennsylvania's agricultural and medicinal medical marijuana program infrastructure, eradicating the illicit market, and creating good jobs while generating tax revenue. This effort is a bipartisan, bicameral effort with support from the governor. If you look at the people who have introduced these pieces of legislation, myself from northeastern Pennsylvania in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, my colleague and co-prime sponsor of this from southwest Pennsylvania in the Pittsburgh area, Senator Street, who's from the southeast Philadelphia area, and Senator Laughlin, who couldn't be here this morning, but from the northwest Erie area. We cover all 4 corners of the state in trying to get this issue done. And along with the governor's support, as he outlined in his budget, this is something that we need to be working on. Smoking marijuana should not be a crime, and we need to prioritize law enforcement resources and redefine a narrative that is not working in today's society. Not only do we need to shift resources toward harder drugs that actually do kill people and start redefining a narrative for a generation that seems lost. People are actually dying from other harder drugs in today's world. Marijuana is not killing people. And we look at 90% of Pennsylvania's borders, 90% of Pennsylvania borders a state that has already legalized adult use. And in this map that you see, New Hampshire is actually in the process of legalizing it right now. So we have another state that will be turning green. What this can actually do in addition, $420 million in tax revenue. And it's not lost on me that the number is $420 million. I find that a little amusing. But those are conservative numbers that we're talking about of what could be generated here for the Commonwealth. 33,350 jobs. That's just in direct jobs here in Pennsylvania that are family-sustaining jobs that can support jobs all throughout the Commonwealth. Now, I'm sure you've heard so many people say, just when we were getting together in the green room back there, people say it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before this is going to happen. Well, there's no better time than now with support from all 4 caucuses and the governor. Now is the time to get this done. Next on who's going to be speaking is the fellow prime sponsor of this legislation, Representative Emily Kincaid.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. And as my co-prime was saying, we are surrounded by states that have already legalized the adult use of cannabis, and they are taking advantage of the fact that we have not. Ohio has a majority of its permits where the dispensaries are lining up along the Pennsylvania and West Virginia border, acknowledging that there are Pennsylvania dollars to be spent on adult use, and they want to capitalize on it when we should be doing that. We should be using Pennsylvania dollars in Pennsylvania to support Pennsylvanians. And we should be learning from all of the other states about the way to do this best and the way to best capitalize on it. So our bill outlines a social equity program that would have a cannabis development fund that supports social and economic equity applicants by providing loans, grants, legal expense coverage, outreach programs, and research to promote equity and development in the industry. The Department of Agriculture has the authority to waive or reduce permit application fees or permit purchase fees of social and economic equity applicants if they meet all of the requirements. Medical marijuana organizations with existing dispensary permits can start selling cannabis for adult use, but social and economic equity applicants would take priority. Non-social and economic equity applicants who partner with social and economic equity applicants would be granted sort of a secondary priority after the social and economic equity applicants. but only if they submit an executed charter agreement with those applicants to provide support, mentorship, training, and other resources to make sure that those applicants get not just a permit, but to doors open. And they may not require, and I think this is really key to remember, they cannot require any kind of a stake in the company or other valuable consideration for that partnership. The other really critical piece of this, and what a lot of other states have done, is criminal justice reform. You cannot legalize adult use marijuana unless you acknowledge that far too many people have ended up in our criminal justice system because we have criminalized marijuana, and we need to address that. This bill provides for the automatic expungement of criminal convictions related to nonviolent offenses under the Controlled Substances Act related to marijuana. AOPC would work with the state police to identify records that are eligible and transmit those records to the Court of Common Pleas for expungement orders. But one thing that's unique in this bill that we haven't seen in other states is we take it a step further, because we acknowledge that marijuana-related offenses are frequently people's first interactions with our criminal justice system, but not the last. And if you want to talk about a gateway drug, that fundamentally is how marijuana is a gateway drug. It is a gateway to criminalization. So our bill also looks at people who are currently serving time or would currently be serving time at the point where this bill would be put into law, and allows them to apply for resentencing if they have a prior marijuana-related conviction, and allows them to, if that is going to be expunged, then they would be able to apply for resentencing to allow them to drop their prior record score, because if someone has a prior record score that drops, they may actually be serving an illegal sentence under our sentencing guidelines if we don't address that piece. And finally, perhaps the thing that I'm most excited about in this bill is that we dedicate fully 5% of the revenue generated by this bill, by this program, to supporting indigent defense. Last year was the first year that this state put any money towards our public defenders, and it was $7.5 million. With the conservative estimate of $420 million in revenue, we're looking at $15 to $20 million alone for supporting our public defenders. And I want to put that into context. The Allegheny County Public Defender's Office entire budget is $13.5 million. So this is a critical need, and we need to support public defense across our Commonwealth. Ohio, once again, they just put $366 million into public defenders. So it's something that Pennsylvania is falling behind on, and it's something that we can use, an acknowledgement that we have over-criminalized something that shouldn't be criminalized, to try to undo the harms in the communities that we have harmed. But we don't get here unless people do the work to pave the way to get us to this point, who do the work to make sure that we are consistently building a coalition to get us to a point where we have support in all four caucuses, in all four corners of our Commonwealth. And so if we do not have these shoulders to stand on, we aren't here right now. So I want to turn it over to Senator Street, who really helped to pave the way to get us to this point. Thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out. One, I want to thank the work that's being done in the House on a really good piece of legislation. Look, we've got a number of bills now and a number of options. And as was pointed out, support in both chambers of this building, Senate and House, and both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, all four caucuses now have folks who are supporting this concept that we need to end the prohibition on the adult use of cannabis. And by and large, there's agreement on what needs to be in a bill. We need to deal with social justice and social equity, both in the supply chain and how folks are going to do business with cannabis, and with those who are socially impacted by social justice in the way they've got prior convictions. Look, it's a great addition to look at prior record scores. Makes a lot of sense. And that's what's coming. We're building on what's happened before. We need to also think about all of the money that's being spent currently on dealing with folks who have an impact with law enforcement, even in the decrim space, because of cannabis. That means there's still a fine. There's still a court worker that has to process it. There's still an officer taking time to write a ticket. There's still a social justice impact, and there's still an impact on that person's life. We know that black and brown folks are 4 to 5 times more likely to have a law enforcement encounter because of cannabis use, even though usage amongst black folks and white folks is relatively the same. We also know through anecdotal evidence, although we don't keep stats on this, that listen, if you're poor and white, walking around a poor white neighborhood, you're a lot more likely to have a cannabis law enforcement encounter than if you're walking around a wealthy white community. We don't keep stats on that, but everybody knows it to be true. So if we're not going to equitably enforce this law, it's time we move on. Nobody believes that we should be warehousing or locking people up for cannabis. And it is so true that folks from Canada, Ohio, New Jersey, New York are all benefiting from our failure to move forward and pass cannabis reform that ends the prohibition of adult use. Our citizens are going across the state, and they're buying cannabis now. And moreover, those who don't do that, who are buying in the illicit market, they don't know what they're buying. It could be laced with something. It could be laced with anything. And there are people who only intended to use cannabis and use it in a way that wouldn't have caused them any serious harm, who are being harmed today because they are getting cannabis in an illicit market where there is no regulation and no testing. And there are folks there, and that doesn't even get to the ones who are the cannabis sellers who are in the illicit market, who are benign and that they're not trying to hurt anybody, but there could be mold or other kinds of things just because it's not stored and cared properly. It's time for us to move forward with the legalization of recreational adult use, and the revenue should be used here for so many things. Criminal justice defense is a great idea. Indigent defense, rather, it's a great idea. But there's so many other uses. But no way should that revenue being used for the people, Pennsylvania tax revenue be used to support people in New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and even Canada, and not being used for Pennsylvanians. It's time for us to move these bills. It's time for the House and Senate to move together. We now have bills that are not too far apart in both chambers. Pass a bill, let's put it on the governor's desk, and let's give the people of Pennsylvania an opportunity to benefit from this economically, to reduce those criminal justice costs, and to not have to go to another state to do something they should be able to do right here in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank Senator Street and along with Senator Laughlin, because the point of where we got to now was an amendment that I drafted and put together based on their legislation back in November that led to these discussions to get to this bill here today. So there's no doubt that these guys were leaders in making this happen for us to be here at where House Bill 2500 is today. Next on the docket is Meredith Butner, who's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks to Representatives Kaufer and Kincaid for inviting me to be here today. As the representative said, my name is Meredith Butner, and I'm proud to serve as the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition. The coalition represents the majority of the operators in Pennsylvania's medical marijuana program. Our members have been safely serving the Commonwealth's medical marijuana patients for more than 6 years. In 6 years, our medical marijuana market has built a strong infrastructure of 32 grower processors and 181 dispensaries to serve the 400,000 plus patients here in the Commonwealth. For many patients, this network of existing operators is literally keeping them alive. While PCC is continuously working to cut through the onerous red tape of bureaucracy to increase efficiency and deliver the highest quality of medicine to patients at the best price, we are also focused on bringing Pennsylvania consumers what they want: access to safe, regulated adult use cannabis. By building on our track record of safety and growing our infrastructure, Pennsylvania has the opportunity to roll out a premier adult use market. Today marks an important milestone in achieving that. With the introduction of HB 2500, Representatives Kaufer and Kincaid have signaled that the effort to bring safe, regulated cannabis to adults 21 and over is in fact a bipartisan policy. Following the introduction of bipartisan legislation by Senators Street and Laughlin last year, the momentum has been building and the calls for bipartisan action now have reached a crescendo. 90% of our neighbors have legalized. By acting now, the legislature can stop the border bleed of tax dollars that Pennsylvania cannabis consumers are eager to contribute to the Commonwealth. With Ohio dispensaries lining up on our western border, we stand to lose millions of dollars to friggin' Ohio, to quote Governor Shapiro. But we also stand to lose jobs, investment, and put our consumers in danger by allowing the illicit market to meet demand. It's time for the legislature, the administration, industry, advocates, and stakeholders to join the bipartisan effort in the House and Senate and deliver to Pennsylvanians what they want: safe, regulated access to adult use cannabis for those 21 and over. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Last but not least, Michael O'Donnell, the District Attorney from Northumberland County.
Thank you. My name's Mike O'Donnell, and I'm the District Attorney of Northumberland County. Why would I support marijuana legalization? I will tell you. The most important reason for adult legalization of marijuana is that the continued illegalization of marijuana sends the wrong message. Yes, you heard that right. You cannot have something so commonly accepted so commonly accepted by the public be illegal under the law. The result of this has become that it is acceptable to break the law. In the society, the law should be respected and followed. Criminalization of marijuana delegitimizes our legal system. So let's talk about the reality of marijuana in Pennsylvania. As it's already been stated, New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland, all have legalized marijuana. This is almost every surrounding state besides West Virginia. In Pennsylvania, when you are convicted or plead guilty of a crime, the court will look to the sentencing guidelines to determine what type of sentence you should receive. The new sentencing guidelines basically only allow for a fine and community service to be given. My county does not even have a community service program. So all I can really do is give you a fine. So let's look at the reality of that fine. When you're charged with a misdemeanor, you're going to have what's called a preliminary hearing. A defendant is going to need to be fingerprinted. If they qualify, they will be entitled to an attorney. By charging that misdemeanor, most counties are going to have an assistant district attorney appear at that preliminary hearing. To sustain a conviction, we're going to have to send that substance to the lab. The majority of this cost is going on the taxpayer. How much money are we wasting doing this, and to accomplish what? When that defendant appears at a preliminary hearing, what happens? They normally plead to a summary citation. So you are charged with a criminal offense, but when you show up to a hearing, they give you a summary citation, which is like a parking ticket. That's the reality in the majority of the counties in Pennsylvania. Legalize it and control it, or leave it illegal and have no oversight over it. That's the decision. Even if it's legal, if you drive intoxicated, you'll get arrested for DUI. If you smoke marijuana with your children, you'll be arrested for endangering the welfare of children. If you smoke in a public area, like just as you drink alcohol in public, you'll be charged with disorderly conduct or public intoxication. Stop kicking the can down the road and make a decision for once. The future is not going to wait for Pennsylvania politics. Thank you.
Thank you once again to all of our speakers here for being here. We have just a few minutes left. I'll take, I'm sure myself and others are happy to take a couple questions if there's any. Yes, sir.
Can you get this done in the next week? I mean, maybe even July 3rd, who knows? Budget could go late, but is this something that you see as like immediately going to be done, or is this a fall issue? Like, what's the timeline?
Our goal is to get this done as soon as possible. This is part of the governor's budget proposal, and I think everybody here standing up here, we've been working diligently to try to get together something that can pass today in both the House and Senate. We are circling the toilet bowl and getting something like this done. Between as Senator Street mentioned before, the differences between the bills in the House and Senate, there's not too much of a difference. We're here trying to get something done, both with what we've been working on alongside with the governor to try to get something that can pass today, get signed into law, and start moving Pennsylvania forward on this issue.
Well, it sounds like that's where your guys' bills are at, but you have Senator Dan Frankel, State Representative Dan Frankel say support state stores. Like, it seems like there's still a lot of internal conversations to happen among folks to get to an agreement.
So, look, I think if there's a House bill that's going to move, it'll be either this bill that'll move in the Senate. It'll either be this bill or it'll be, I think it's 2100. It'll be a version of the bill that's similar to the one in the Senate. The other things you're talking, the only versions of the bill that are being discussed in the Senate are similar to what's been proposed today. So I don't think there's much debate in our chamber about the overall methodology. We're still working through some of the particulars because that's part of the legislative process. But I think on our side of the building, both Democrats and Republicans have lined up pretty solidly on something that's conceptually similar to what's been presented today.
And I might also add that this is something also conceptually similar to what the governor's working on, as opposed to some others as well. Yes, sir.
I had a question about the existing medical program in the state, and then obviously you talked about the influx, what you'd like to see from a social equity standpoint. Now, I have read a couple pieces of legislation that other people have written, and it does give the current existing medical institutions a lot of runway and the ability to expand. I think reading your notes here, it's a lot more, it made the bubble smaller, but in terms of the guidance for how you merge this existing medical with what you want to see from recreational from like a macro sense, like where do you guys, I guess, pull your guidance from outside of the existing?
So, I mean, we've looked at a lot of different states and how things have worked. So our plan would bring the medical marijuana and the adult use program together under the Department of Agriculture, so that it's one department issuing one set of regulations. It's not two different departments giving out, multiple sets of guidance. And so the medical program would continue to exist. And I think there's a need for that because there are people who are using cannabis medicinally, and having the medical marijuana card is really important for employment and other things like that. So it's a protection piece. So the medical dispensaries would be ultimately allowed to sell, but they would come second to our social and economic equity applicants, and with the goal of really incentivizing a lot of those bigger companies that came in. I think that we learned a lesson from a lot of other states that sort of just let large, wealthy companies come in, people who could sort of self-finance, that we ended up seeing a lot of, wealthy, predominantly white companies benefiting when the communities hit hardest by the war on drugs, by criminalization, were left behind. And we don't want to see that happen. So we're hoping to actually incentivize those companies to invest in the communities, in the smaller businesses that represent those communities, to be able to get into the market and get not just their permits, but doors open before they can get a permit themselves. So, did you have a follow-up? Sorry.
No, I mean, in terms of like when states decide to go from medical to a full adult use program, the existing medical imprint isn't as large in terms of like when that transition happens. So in terms of like market share, I think a lot of the medical companies, and then in some of the language, these stores are going to be able to, experience adult use sales before boards are created, applications are created, awareness is done, among, you know, smaller businesses are even able to put together a sort of strategy,
So,
right?
sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I guess overall, I think a lot of these bills have a lot of the same language. I know I haven't dug deep into yours specifically.
It's only
but-
220 pages. I don't understand.
Well, no, I mean, I've read 2050, I've read 2210, I've read 846. So I'm just speaking from experience. I've had the opportunity to study other states and how they rolled out their equity programs, specifically from a person in that space who's realizing, you know, what they're up against,
Yeah.
right? And the medical people in this state, very powerful, have a lot of opportunity, and to your point, they are being able to pour back. But when I look at how all the language is similar, it kind of all goes through a different cadence, and I was just wondering how, you know, with the difference of the bills, it always goes that same way with access from, you know, like in my mind, I would love an opportunity for the first recreational sale to be from a minority store in Pennsylvania.
Well, and the way that this is written, that's the goal. You're not necessarily, so while medical dispensaries would be entitled to have adult use, it's not automatic. It's not an automatic conversion. They also have to apply. They have to pay the $100,000 permit fee, and they're not prioritized. The social and economic equity applicants are the ones that are prioritized above anybody else. So, you know, the sort of the quickest way for them to be able to get their permit would be to invest in a social and economic equity applicant. I don't know if you have.
And I'll just jump in from an industry perspective. So what we've seen in a lot of other markets is this space between legalization and sales beginning is where we see the illicit market take hold. For example, what's happened in New York. So one of the things that happens when we can use the existing operators to roll out a program the way that they've designed is we can make sure that the equity programs are actually funded and are actually resourced. And we're not setting folks up to apply for licenses and try to get businesses off the ground without those resources. So one of our goals as an existing network of operators is to make sure that whatever that social equity program is that the legislators design, that we can make sure that the funding, the resources, the technical assistance are there so that we can make sure that the social equity applicants actually get to market and aren't just stuck holding the bag on real estate and they can never get open, right? So this program is really designed to build off of the existing infrastructure and help equity applicants roll out the next wave of infrastructure here in Pennsylvania.
I was curious why you think, you know, Representative Frankel's bills like let's run it through the state store system, and why you think this idea of running it through the medical marijuana dispensaries is the better way to go. And then secondly, is there controls on how many dispensaries? Because that's the other concern we hear about, like Colorado, more dispensaries and McDonald's.
So this is going to have to be our last question, just so you know. We're 5 minutes over, and I'm sure we can answer some questions after. But Representative Frankel's legislation, I don't think is passable in its current form. I don't think the industry can support it. I don't think the representatives in the House or the Senate would support that, and it doesn't follow the outline as outlined by the governor as well. You know, if we're trying to build consensus here, it's about working together across the aisle. We have a Democrat-led House, a Republican-led Senate, and a Democrat governor, trying to thread that needle and work together to find an area of compromise to get something done. I think that's what the efforts between both myself and Representative Kincaid, along with Senators Street and Laughlin, that has been the effort to try to get something done. And so, you know, by working with something that we know right off the bat is not something that's passable in a Republican Senate, I think it's a non-starter the moment it hits the doors of the Senate. So we're working in the world, the real world, the world of reality of how does something actually get done. And I think that we're here in a point where this is something that can actually get done.
Yeah, I want to also look, even in a Democratic world, there are concerns about the way the Liquor Control Board has handled alcohol sales in black communities in Philadelphia, particularly with their inability to stop us from having problem stop and goes. Nobody wants to see stop and go stop-and-go cannabis dispensaries. We're certainly overwhelming support for cannabis legalization, but the Liquor Control Board in the communities I represent hadn't even got alcohol right. So no, there's not support. Not just Republican opposition, there's Democratic opposition in the Senate for it, and there's no Democratic senator who has supported it. So there's no senators, Republican or Democrat, who are advancing that idea.
The last piece I just want to add is running it through our state stores also kind of prevents this sort of social equity piece of it. If we're running it through our state stores, I think what message you're sending is that the state has criminalized this for generations, and now the state is the only place that's really going to profit from it, not the communities that have really been exploited through the war on drugs. And I think that that is a piece that we really need to be aware of as we're talking about legalization. I think it can't just be the state that's benefiting from this. And there are provisions in this bill that allow municipalities to put zoning ordinances in effect and other things to be able to, keep dispensaries in areas that, are out of, kind of out of the way. There's advertising limitations, so it can't be targeted towards kids. And there's a lot of things that, again, we've learned from other states in terms of protecting the community to make sure that we're selling to 21 and up and we're doing it in a responsible way. And if anybody has any questions, we're happy to hang out and answer more questions if you have them.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. If you need to see us, you can see us individually. Thank you, everybody, for attending.